All right, guys and girls, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening to that short little break introduction there from our rider that we get every time we do an interview with these guys here on the AlwaysMoto podcast. Let's jump into the emergency department for this week coming up at Atlanta. The emergency department. All the injuries, all the gory details, and when they'll be back on track. It's the list you really don't want to be on. You do not want to be on this list. I say it every single week. And it just makes it even more so important when we see things that happen to like Christian Craig on the weekend. That was a painful day for Christian, unfortunately. And we'll get to that here in a second. But yeah, you don't want to be on this list. All right, things to note coming into this emergency department today. Bubba Pauly and that thumb injury of his, it looks like, as per the recent updates on his Instagram, which we got to check in with him a bit further on this, but it looks like that tip, the reattachment of the thumb tip has failed, and he's had to have that amputated. It's been all skin graft over by the looks of it. So hopefully we'll check on him very shortly, but it looks like that's going to be a bit of a different recovery for him now than he was probably hoping for initially, but it'll still work out in the end. He'll just be missing that tip of his thumb, which is unfortunate because the thumb, as most people know, is rather important in life. But anyway, he'll make the best of it. He won't be the first. Jesse Nelson was one that ran without it as well. He'll probably have something similar going on there to try and get back on the bike maybe later this year. We'll see how it works out. Update on Seth Hammaker. He is back very soon riding, and he will be aiming to return for outdoors. There'll be no Supercross this year for Seth Hammaker, unfortunately, from that Pro Circuit Kawasaki team. But we look to see him back on track at round 1 at Parla. Marvin Muscan is still in a brace. Yes, that's right. You heard it here. He's still in a brace. That scaphoid fracture that needed to heal naturally, which obviously will take longer because you can't put it back together and join it up and glue it and put the bone grafting or they've now got synthetic bone graft material that they could have injected in there. None of that was able to be done because of old injuries in that area. So he's had to do it naturally, and obviously that's taking a long time. But as of the KDM headquarter opening that they had the other week, he is still in a brace. So that's taken quite a long time, and that means he is definitely not making it back for any Supercross in 2023, which is unfortunate because I'm not sure what he's doing next year. That might have been his last season. We'll have to wait and see. Garrett Marchbanks is back. Finally, he's riding, which is great. He's missed all of Supercross so far with that arm injury. He actually went down the route that we were talking about not too recently ago, about the removal of the plates and screws, where most of these guys don't have the time to do it. Garrett's taken that option to take them out, and that's what's taken this arm fracture so long for him to get back from. There is a talk that he might be back for a few of the Supercross remaining, maybe even from this weekend. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I haven't seen anything posted from Glub MX or Garrett, and I've reached out to both, and nothing at this stage. We're obviously recording this a few days out from the weekend, so maybe it hasn't been decided yet. But at this stage, Garrett Marchbanks might be back for some Supercross just here shortly. We'll have to wait and see. As per usual, no information on Michael Mosiman. It continues. I don't know what he's doing, but he's definitely not on the social media channels at this point in time. We think he's going to be out this weekend again, but it wouldn't surprise me if he rolled onto the start line either. So I have to wait and see. But Michael Mosiman potentially out this weekend as well. All right, now the injuries from Glendale. It was a bit of a rough and tumble weekend, unfortunately. A couple of big ones. Obviously, Christian Craig was our biggest one in that practice session early in the day. The number 28 on that Rockstar Energy Husqvarna Racing went down in the whoops, as we spoke about earlier in the show here with the contractor. He's managed to dislocate an elbow and dislocate a hip. Now, both of those injuries, dislocations are terrible anyway. They're painful. They take a lot of pressure to make the joint come out. So there's a lot of impact that goes through that, and that obviously causes a lot of trauma, but pain. Now, to dislocate your hip and to dislocate your elbow, they're said to be the two hardest joints to dislocate in the body. He had them happen both at once. That's got to be the most painful thing ever. And if you watch his vlog that is out now, I've watched it earlier today, he's laying on the track and it's quite uncomfortable to watch, but he is in visible pain. He's moaning. He's not in a good way at that point when it happened, and I can understand why that would be a very uncomfortable situation for him. Now, the only thing that he can hope for, and I believe he's got surgery coming up here, not straight away, but in a few weeks, and I'll get to that in a sec. But the hip ideally hopefully goes back in, and same with the elbow, went back in easily. But there might be I think there's some breaks to these areas as well just yet. I believe it's the elbow that's got a little break with it, which is unfortunate. But hopefully the hip's gone back in without any other drama to the cup or to the humeral head, to the femoral head, I should say. So I have to keep an eye on that. But that's about a 6 to 8 week recovery just on the dislocation of the hip. The dislocated elbow, if he does have to have surgery, which they'll talk in the vlog about, is that he has to wait a week or so for the swelling of the elbow to go down before they'll operate on that. Now, that's a normal case scenario. If there's too much swelling, they won't operate, because obviously when they cut you open, they create more swelling, and they don't want to then create an issue with compartment syndrome or other risk factors for infection, etc. So they will let that come down before they reopen that up. Now, depending on how long that takes, that could be a week, that could be 2 or 3. It's all just dependent on how the recovery process goes for Christian in these early stages, and if that recovery of the swelling happens quickly or not. Now, swelling isn't a bad thing. Everybody tells you that you've got to get that swelling down. Swelling is the body's natural response to an injury, and it's put there to protect the area and to provide nutrient to the area to help regenerate and recover the injury. It's a necessary evil. If you reduce that swelling too quickly, you'll risk further issues with poor rehab as such, poor recovery. It just won't work the same way. The swelling needs to be there to some extent, and you can't force it out any quicker than the body will want to. So that if you do something like a lot of swelling management in the first 24 to 48 hours from a big injury, you can risk having that swelling reappear later down the track at some random point in time that really impacts your recovery later. So it's a tight walk to rope. Walk to rope. That was a great line, David. It's a tight rope to walk. Tight line, tight walk. I'm stuck on my words. Anyway, you're getting the point. It's hard to figure it out. You've got to do enough of the swelling management, but not too much of it. So he'll be doing that to try and get that down so he can get that surgery done. But that will then be about an 8 to 12 week recovery from that elbow issue with that surgery. So we're potentially not going to see him until mid to late outdoors, which is unfortunate. But that's how the cookie crumbles in moto. # injuries are a part of moto. Next on the injury list, Styles Robinson, the number 40 Star Racing Yamaha, went down in that first Triple Crown race. Nobody even saw him down, unfortunately, from the coverage, but you saw about 3 bikes run over the top of him. And unfortunately, that's meant that he has a right lower leg injury. He's got a tib-fib fracture, and he's going for surgery. Unfortunately for Styles, that will mean the end of Supercross. It's about an 8 to 12 week recovery for that injury. So he will, again, be somewhere mid to late outdoors as well before he will be back on the bike. Hayden Melross, our Aussie, the privateer that went over, he was rocking the 105 on the KTM, was looking really good to be making it straight into the Triple Crown events. Unfortunately, on one of his hot laps, he went down in that rhythm section and straight away just pointed to his leg. And we all knew that was the end of it, unfortunately. Now, I've been in touch with Hayden. He hasn't given me the details. He didn't know them at that point, unfortunately. But it seems like he's having some work done on that right ankle area. We're hoping to be able to bring you some more information on that here soon. We were actually going to have an interview with Hayden this week, and it's why we don't have an interview in this episode of the AlwaysMoto podcast, was because we're going to talk to him after his Glendale results and about what he's planning to do for the rest of the Supercross season. Unfortunately got injured, and that sort of threw a spanner in our plans. So hopefully we'll catch up with him here shortly. But unfortunately, yeah, it means no interview this week. So we'll catch up with Hayden here very soon and find out a bit more details from him. That injury, but depending on the severity and information he gets, that means this Supercross for the AMA stuff is over for him. And he may then have to wait. He might be doing something with WSX. I don't know for sure. But at worst, he'll be back for the Australian Supercross Series later in the year. Now, Luke Kalitsian, I'm not sure on the pronunciation there, Luke, I apologise for that, but he's a privateer. He was involved in that crash with Styles Robinson. He got away pretty easily, but he did mention that he had a toe fracture, which, look, on the scale of things is pretty minor. He could ride through that if he needed to, but luckily West has a couple of weeks off, so he might be back for that round that's a east-west at MetLife, or the next round, which would be Denver. So we'll have to see how he goes, but he should be fine. Little bit of an update, not from Glendale, but happened just prior to Glendale. It was that Cameron McAdoo, another pro circuit rider going down that we spoke about last week. We didn't know the details at the time of the shoulder injury. We do now. It was a dislocated shoulder, a right shoulder, and a torn labrum. Now, the labrum is what helps hold that humerus head into the joint. It's the suction cap as such. So he's had to have that repaired, similar to what I've had done myself recently. And he will actually be out for about 8 to 12 weeks while he rehabs that shoulder. Again, this is going to put him into mid to late outdoors at best before he's back returning to the races, which is unfortunate for Cameron. Cameron's had a rough trot here recently in the last few years with injuries, and he's always seemed to miss a chunk of time with each one of them. Hopefully he can get this shoulder right quickly and make some impact here late in the season of 23. Cade Clayson, just a quick update. I can't remember exactly what we said in the last episode, but we've got the information here again, so we'll just say it now. Midweek before Glendale, broken rib, punctured lung, missed Glendale. Not sure what his plans are for this weekend. There's been no further communication from Cade about that. Hopefully we see him either this week or next. We'll have to just wait and see when he gets on track, whether he's there for Atlanta or if he's back for MetLife. But it's all pain dependent with that one, and whether he has any aerobic capacity in the lung itself is able to function as normal, because that's what's going to hamper him the most. The rib will be painful, but you can get by. But the punctured lung itself is what's going to hamper him, when he's trying to do aerobic activity, which is what he's going to do as soon as he gets on the bike. So have to see how that goes as to when he gets back on the bike. Now, making returns this week at Atlanta. It'll be the first Supercross race for 2023 for Joe Shimoda. He's finally back on that pro circuit Kawasaki. He had that broken collarbone in late January, basically right before the start of the East Coast Series, and he's been out ever since. But he's making his return this weekend at Atlanta. So great to see that he is back and coming back for only a couple of rounds. It means that he's getting some of those points for that SuperMotocross Series qualifications as needed for the end of the year. So that's awesome for Joe, and it's awesome, good timing for the Pro Circuit Kawasaki team as they lost McAdoo last week. All right, another one returning this week is Corey Carson. It's a privateer on the Suzuki. He also broke his collarbone earlier in the year. He's had surgery and he is now back ready to go. So he'll be back at Atlanta, which is awesome. And we've also checked in with Robert Haley, who dislocated his shoulder 2 weeks ago. But he is back on the bike and ready to go for Atlanta. So that's awesome news for Robert as well. He's a privateer on a Yamaha 296, I think it was. So yeah, good to see that Robert is back as well. So a couple of riders making their way back for the East Coast 250 class. None that I'm aware of at this point for the 450 class. But as always, put this information in the back of your mind. Check on our socials closer to the race day. We'll have more updates if we find out stuff in time beforehand to help you with your fantasy picks, to help you understand if your favorite rider will be back on track or not. All right, let's take a quick break here on the Always Moto podcast.